The Jets officially opened training camp this week, but one of their biggest offseason acquisitions won't be there. Let's break down the Haason Reddick situation today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Wednesday, July 24th, 2024, and I'm your host, John B. from GanggreenNation.com. Thank you so much for making the show your first listener, first watch every day. Subscribe to the show for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you'll get new episodes as soon as they're posted. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, give it a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out and helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Well, each Wednesday we try and do a mailbag with listener questions. We were going to do our mailbag today, but Haason Reddick had other ideas. If you have not seen the news yet, yesterday word came out that the star defensive end who the Jets traded for in the offseason is holding out of training camp. He is not expected to show at training camp at all. He could take this all the way to the regular season unless he gets the new contract he wants. So obviously, news with major implications for the Jets. We'll do our mailbag later this week. We got to talk about Haason Reddick today. And I have many thoughts on this. But the first thing I want to say, and I think the most important thing I want to say, is don't panic. I think that's just great advice in general in life. Nothing ever good comes from panicking. Let's relax. Let's take a deep breath. Let's think the situation through. Now, the first thing I'll tell you is that I understand that, a few weeks back when Haason Reddick sat out minicamp, I said that the odds favor him being in training camp this year. They did. Obviously, just because odds favor something doesn't mean it's necessarily a 100% lock it's going to happen. There was always a chance that Haason Reddick was going to hold out of training camp, that he was going to escalate this thing. Even though he's not in training camp, the odds are still overwhelmingly in favor that he will be there week 1 when the Jets take on the San Francisco 49ers. He has every incentive to do that. Training camp, he will now pay a $50,000 fine a day for not showing up. And it sounds like he's prepared to take this all the way up to the start of the regular season. Well, if we get to the start of the regular season, he's given up over $14 million. That's his salary for this year. He doesn't get paid if he doesn't play. So if you're Haason Reddick and it becomes clear that by the start of the regular season, the Jets are not going to give you a new contract, you're probably, going to suit up, you would think. Look, I can't get in Reddick's head. I can't guarantee you. Here on July 24th, I cannot make you a promise that Reddick will be there Monday Night Football week 1 in San Francisco. But I still think, the smart money would be on him being there. I think that it's very easy to get emotional in a situation like this. I think it's easy to get carried away. I think it's easy to say this is going to doom the Jets season. Now, look, there are issues with this. There's no question about this. There are issues with this does not speak well. The way this has been handled, I do not think speaks well to the Jets. We'll get to that in a minute. But this is not the type of thing right now, here on July 24th, that I'm going to sit here and tell you the Jets season is sunk as a result of this. The odds favor Reddick coming back to play this year. The odds favor Reddick playing very well because he's a great player. He's been one of the top sack artists in the league the last 4 years. And if he doesn't get a new contract, I talked about this a little bit yesterday. If he doesn't get a new contract, he's got every incentive to go out there and play great because, he's got to keep it up to keep playing well. The other thing I'll tell you is that, look, fortunately, we're at a point where this Jets roster is not really dependent on one player, except for, maybe Aaron Rodgers. Like the Jets need Aaron Rodgers to be out there and playing well. That's true of every team. Every team needs a quarterback to go out there and play well. If the Jets lose Aaron Rodgers 4 plays in again, let's not even talk about that. They'll be in trouble. Other than that, I don't think there's a player they can't afford to lose. And that's a difference from years past. I remember, in 2022, when Breece Hall went down, I remember saying, that's the type of thing that can destroy your season. And in many ways it did, because the Jets offense, really went downhill after Breece got injured. Breece was kind of covering for Zach Wilson's deficiencies in 2022. You want to go back to 2021, Carl Lawson, another defensive end guy, another prized defensive end signing the Jets made, maybe not as prized as Reddick. He went down in training camp against the Green Bay Packers. You want to hear a funny story about that? I was in California that week, and I was driving this beautiful highway, the Pacific Coast Highway, one of the most beautiful drives you can have in the United States of America. And I stopped at my hotel for the night, and I had a pre-existing date to do a Locked On show with my buddy Peter Bukowski, who hosts Locked On Sports Today, and it was supposed to be a Jets preview. And I remember I knew nothing about this. So for Peter's first question, John Carl Lawson goes down for the season today. What's your reaction? And it was the first I heard of it. And my reaction was that Carl Lawson was a critical player for the Jets. The Jets had no other pass rushers on their team. They had no other edge rushers on their team in 2021. They were in big trouble. I remember, you can go back and listen to the show that this happened. I remember back in 2019 when Sam Darnold got mono. And I know it's kind of crazy to think of Sam Darnold going down would destroy your season. Sam Darnold obviously turned out to not be very good. I remember I said week 2 of the show, the season's over. This is not a team right now, except maybe a quarterback, that's going to be destroyed by losing a star player. The team's talented enough. In fact, the defensive side of the ball is talented enough. I always talk about this, how the Jets are good at both corner and the defensive line. If there are 2 spots I want to be good at in today's NFL on defense, it's corner and the defensive line. Look, I'd love to be good at linebacker. I'd love to be good at safety. If you're offering me be good or bad at either of these spots, of course I'm going to take good. It's common sense. But which would I prefer? If I can only be good at two of those spots, I'm taking defensive line and corner. And I always say that there's this symbiotic relationship between your defensive line and the cornerback group, because the NFL is a passing league, and it's a cliche, but it's a cliche because it's true. Teams have to throw the football to be successful. And if you have a good defensive line, it helps your corners out because they don't have to cover as long. If you can get to the quarterback and generate pressure, it makes quarterbacks worse. It means receivers, you can't find the open receiver. But the reverse is true. The inverse is true also. And the Jets, because they have good corners, they can weather not having such a great defensive line, because your corners don't have to cover as long when your defensive line's good. But your defensive line is more time to get to the quarterback when your corners are good, because they can lock guys down. And this Jets team has maybe the top corner trio in the NFL with Sauce and DJ. And Michael Carter, he's still the second, even though the first isn't here anymore. So Jets are still going to have an excellent defense. By the way, the defensive line is still not bad. I mean, you got Quinton Williams. Quinton Williams is a great defensive tackle. You got Jermaine Johnson, who's coming off a Pro Bowl season in year 2. And you have Will McDonald, who may be unproven, but still was a first-round pick a year ago. I mean, I still think you got to be optimistic about the way this defense looks. And that's if Reddick doesn't play. And even if Reddick, and that's, the odds are still against it. And I understand, you may be saying, John, back, a few weeks back, you were back in June, you were telling me Reddick was going to be, well, I wasn't telling you Reddick was going to be in training camp. I don't think. I think I said the odds are in favor of it. And, it's just because the odds are in favor of something doesn't mean it comes to be. But the odds are even more in favor of Reddick being there week 1 against the San Francisco 49ers. If he's there, you're going to have a very motivated guy. So I don't mean to tell you that this is irrelevant, because I think whenever a star player is not happy with his contract to the point he's holding out, I don't think it's fair to say nothing to see here. I want to be clear about that. There is reason for concern. And quite frankly, and we're going to get to this in a bit, I have concern about the way the Jets manage this whole thing, because there's a lot that does not add up to me. And as much as anything, that has implications for how we view this Jets management, the trust we have in this Jets management going forward. And I think it's valid to be concerned, but panic is never a good idea, folks. I'm not panicked for the reasons I laid out. Reddick's still probably going to be here, but even if he's not, the Jets have the players to weather this storm. That has not been true in the past. The Jets have been way too dependent on a handful of players in the past, and guys who really weren't that good to begin with. The Jets are not wholly dependent on Haason Reddick this year. That said, as I mentioned, I think there are some things you can question about this. As we continue here on this Wednesday edition of Locked On Jets, I don't take any pleasure in doing it, but I have to take the Jets for task for the way they've handled the situation, because there's just a lot that does not add up to me, and I'll explain what I mean by that as we continue here on this Wednesday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. And with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets, but you can buy tickets to other events. I've used Gametime to buy tickets to tennis, to a Broadway musical, to a college football bowl game. Will Haason Reddick be there week 1 against the San Francisco 49ers? I'm not sure. I think he probably will be, but either way, you can get your tickets on Gametime up to the last minute. And Gametime's so easy to use. Again, I've used it myself. I'm not just telling you about this. I've used Gametime. You just open up your phone or mobile device, open the app, a couple of clicks, and you have amazing tickets. I mean, I still can't believe some of the prices I've gotten on these seats. I love Gametime. It's the place to go. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets for Major League Baseball or anything else with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and you redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL, one word with no space, for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. And a big shout out to you every day, as this is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. Normally on Wednesdays, we do our weekly mailbag. We'll have to do our mailbag later this week, but Haason Reddick is holding out. The star defensive end who the Jets just traded for this offseason. They gave up a 2026 third-round pick that could escalate to a second-round pick in 2026 if Reddick hits certain playing time and performance benchmarks. He's not going to be in training camp because he's unhappy with his contract. And I have to ask a question. How did the Jets allow it to get to this point? Now, before I get into that, I will tell you something. You ever hear the expression, there are only two guarantees in life, death and taxes? There are actually three guarantees in life: death, taxes, and whenever the Jets are hit with bad PR, they will leak some story to some beat writer to try and exonerate themselves. And of course, that happened yesterday as the Jets, leaked to a beat writer. We had a deal in place with Reddick. He agreed to come play with us on his current contract. Or it was actually we agreed to tweak a few things with the contract, and then he shocked us all. He shocked us. Well, I have a couple of issues with this story the Jets are putting out there. Number one is that it's not consistent. There are other reporters saying something different. There are other reporters saying that there was no deal in place. The story the Jets are telling is essentially like they agreed to adjust his contract for this year and add some money that wasn't guaranteed, make it guaranteed. Well, my question is, why wasn't that done? If that's true, why wasn't that done the second the trade was done? The trade was completed. If you agreed to tweak the contract, why wasn't the contract tweaked? Because we have no evidence that the contract was actually tweaked. But going a little deeper than this, and again, we don't really know what's happening because we've heard different reports from different reporters. I think I've heard like three different stories depending on which reporter you're listening to. But let me put it this way. Everybody knew that Haason Reddick was seeking a new contract. Every single person out there knew it. That's the reason the Eagles traded him. He wanted a new deal. Now you're going to sit here and tell me you're shocked that Haason Reddick's holding out because he wants a new deal when you didn't work out and give him a new contract? I'm sorry. It's just a little tough to believe. And again, I take no pleasure in criticizing the Jets because Lord knows this podcast has been around since 2016, and it's been pretty much just to criticize the Jets fest because they've done nothing but make moves that deserve. They've made a few good moves through the years, but they haven't made the playoffs since we began this podcast. I think criticism has been justified of this team, and I mean I'm sorry, but to sit there and act like you're shocked by this, Reddick. I mean Robert Saleh said before minicamp when he held out he hadn't heard from Reddick, and there were no warning signs there. It just doesn't make a lot of sense for the Jets to say that. And I've said this in the past. I don't understand how you complete this trade without making sure the contract was wrapped up. It's just a very odd turn of events. Now the reports are the Jets are still willing to renegotiate the terms for the 2024 contract, but they're not willing to go further. But here's the other thing. In the Jets PR piece that came out, the Jets side of the story, which they always leak to a beat writer, they say that apparently they were ready to give him a new contract if he gets off to a hot start this season. And I mean, I just want you to take a minute to think about how little sense that makes. Because again, this is coming from the Jets. The Jets are trying to kind of spin this now. This really isn't our fault. We agreed that we take a look after a few games. That doesn't make any sense to me. And here's why it doesn't make any sense to me. I think there are like two ways you could view a Haason Reddick contract extension. The first way you could view it is this guy's a beast. This guy's dominant. This guy's been one of the best pass rushers the last four straight years of 11 plus sacks. In the second team All-Pro season a couple of years ago when he had 16. This guy's a beast. Let's give him a new contract. That's one way to look at it. Another is, this guy's hitting 30. I don't know if we want to commit to him. What doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me is taking the path that the Jets are trying to claim they took, which is, well, we're not sure, but if he plays good the first month, then we'll be convinced. Well, either you're convinced or you're not, because either you're convinced that, he's going to continue to play at a very high level. And if you're not convinced of that, I don't know why you traded for him, because the Jets were pounding their chest about making this deal. How we got this amazing pass rusher. And, not unfairly so. Haason Reddick is an amazing pass rusher. But you guys kept going on about what an amazing pass rusher he got. But we don't trust him enough to extend him. Unless he plays a good, that doesn't make sense to me. Like, what difference does 4 games make? You either evaluated, he's going to age well, or you evaluated, we don't trust him to age well. And if you don't trust him to age well, I don't know why you traded for him to begin with. It doesn't really add up. And this is, I'm not inclined to believe what the Jets are saying, because first of all, there are different reports from different people. Nobody's coming out with a consistent report on this. There's variations to this report any which way you go. That's number one. Number two, look, I don't think the Jets have earned any benefit of the doubt. When you miss the playoffs 13 straight years, and this stuff happens over and over again, these bizarre situations that only happen to the Jets, it's just like a never-ending stream of things that only happen to the Jets. The latest one, a guy holds out after you just trade for him. I don't think you've earned the benefit of the doubt. You got to start winning to earn the benefit of the doubt. I give Kansas City the benefit of the doubt in a situation like this because they've been a successful franchise. They've shown they can be trusted. The Jets always get themselves into these situations, and they always go to the beat writers and claim this wasn't our fault. So that's number two. But the third reason is their story just doesn't make a whole lot of sense, what I just laid out there. The fortunate thing is that there's still a long time. We're still a long way off from September. We're over a month. We're over a month and a half away from these games starting. So there's still time to get this right. And the Jets, need to figure. Look, I'm not saying I'm not taking a side here on what you should do. I just think the Jets need to figure this out. And this should have been figured out at the time you made the trade. And there was all the time in the world to make the deal. Did not have a deadline. It's not like the Jets were on the clock in the draft, and the pick they were sending for Reddick was on the clock with them, right? This was a pick 2 years down the line. They had all the time in the world to complete this. And now they're sitting here saying this guy who everybody in the league knew wanted a new contract. You can't blame us for being shocked that he wants a new contract. And I'm going to make one other point here. And I know this point may not be popular, but I've been consistent on this through the years. It's something I've said over and over. I'm a big believer in that you keep the guys who developed in your system. And there are lots of different reasons for that. I think, sometimes the guys just show they're a good fit in the locker room. Sometimes, guys just show that they really work in the offense or the defensive scheme that you run. And there's always a risk importing somebody new. And I look at this, the Jets just kind of jettisoned 2 guys who developed here. Not homegrown John Franklin Myers wasn't homegrown in the truest sense of the phrase, because, he was drafted, he was with the Rams before he came to the Jets. But John Franklin Myers and Bryce Huff both grew up here. They both developed into good players here. And the Jets just jettisoned them this offseason and brought in Reddick. Sometimes the grass isn't always greener. And look, I still think Reddick's going to come in and play well. So I don't want to go too far with this. But, there can be a drawback to just constantly chasing the biggest stars, the biggest names, and not, appreciating what you got. And, on a day like this, you can't help but think that. Now, head here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll end the show on a sunny note. We started with some good news. We moved to some bad news. We're going to end on a happy note, because there actually might be a few positives that come from Reddick sitting out of training camp. And we'll get to what they are as we continue here on this Wednesday edition of Locked On Jets. Our episode today of Locked On Jets is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is what also keeps your ride or die alive. And eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Only available to U.S. customers. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Wednesday. We're talking about Haason Reddick holding out of training camp. I want to end the show on a positive note, because there actually could be some good that comes from this. And as I mentioned in the first segment, it's not the end of the world for the Jets. And even if Haason Reddick takes us up to week 1, what will that mean? I mean, maybe he'll have a more limited snap count than he otherwise would on week 1. I remember back in 2005, and we're really dating ourselves here, 19 years ago, John Abraham held out of training camp because he wanted a new contract from the Jets. And, he's back week 1. And the Jets kind of limited his snap count that first week because he was playing himself back into football shape. But I don't think it's going to take that long for Reddick to get himself, because this isn't the old days where players needed training camp to get into shape. Now, they may need training camp to get in football shape. There's different from being in great physical condition and being ready to play football, being used to taking hits. But the thing about today's NFL is that I don't even know that training camp really prepares you for the regular season anyway, because they don't really hit that much. And then the starters don't really play that much in preseason anyway. So I don't even know that Reddick's going to be that far behind. Even compared with where you were 20 years ago, I think Abraham missed something. This day and age, I'm not sure that Reddick's really going to miss a whole lot. I mean, he's in great physical shape. He may not be in football shape, but neither is anybody else. I mean, check out week 1. Look at how many guys watch week 1 and check out how many guys end up cramping up, once you get to the second half of games because they're not in football shape. So, I don't think it's really going to be that big of a deal. And if anything, I feel like his absence in training camp might be beneficial for the Jets because it means Will McDonald's going to get a lot more run with the first team. And I think my view on training camp is kind of similar to my view on the offseason program. I've spoken about this a lot on the show if you're an everyday, or maybe you're tired of hearing me say this, but I feel like with the offseason program, it doesn't, and I've come to this conclusion not just through my own views, but I've had I don't want to make myself out. I'm not like the ultimate insider who's speaking with players every day, but I've spoken with a few players. You've heard some of it. I mean, you've heard this a couple times on the show when I've interviewed players, and a few times off the camera. And I've asked this because I've been interested what their views were, and their views are always, if you're a young player, you're working on your technique, extra reps, yeah, that's good in the offseason program. You're an established player. You know how to get ready for the season. You're going to be good. You're going to be good to go week 1. You don't really need the offseason program. I think in many ways that's true when we're talking about the training camp, because again, training camp's kind of watered down these days. It's not that big of a deal. It's not what it used to be. You don't have the 2-a-days anymore. You don't have the, even the padded practices are much more scaled back than they used to be. So I think for McDonald's, guy who's really trying to develop his technique, and maybe some of the other younger guys, Braden McGregor, who the Jets signed out of Michigan as an undrafted free agent, it can be beneficial for them because it means there's more reps for them. It's more opportunities for some guy who was, McGregor or somebody else, somebody who's kind of off the radar, more opportunities for them to get practice reps. And, maybe the Jets find a diamond in the rough. Maybe this helps them identify, a player who wasn't super heralded, maybe a guy who wasn't a high draft pick, but it gives them more opportunities to evaluate players. So in a way, maybe this ends up having a positive net benefit for the Jets, because at the end of the day, as long as Reddick's there week 1, and I understand, look, there are no guarantees that Haason Reddick's going to be there for week 1. And as I mentioned in the first segment, a lack of panic is not the same thing as lacking concern. I just think you have to moderate. I think you have to understand the level to which you should be concerned. But if you're going to take a glass that's half full look, hey, you know what? Well, McDonald's going to get more opportunities to work on his game in training camp. Perhaps this benefits him going forward, because this is a guy the Jets are going to be leaning on. The third defensive end in the Jets scheme actually is pretty important for this team. 2 years ago, Jermaine Johnson did not generate a lot of headlines for his play as a rookie because he was playing with 3 guys who were rookie of the year candidates. I'm going to count Breece Hall in that. But he was a solid number 3 defensive end. Last year, you kind of saw Bryce Huff enter that role after a couple of years where he was just a situational pass rusher where the Jets didn't think more of him. He finally stepped into that number 3 defensive end role, had 10 sacks. The way Robert Saleh rotates his defensive linemen in and out, the number 3 defensive end plays a lot. The number 3 defensive end gets close to a starter share of snaps. Now, when I say they rotate guys in and out, that doesn't mean you have 4 guys who play starter snaps. I think if you look at the numbers, it kind of stops with number 3. But the number 3 defensive end is important, and that's Will McDonald's role this year. And Will McDonald's unproven. Will McDonald's trying to develop. He's going to get extra reps now. He's going to get extra opportunities to work on his technique, especially use those big arms. Will McDonald, he's a guy who is going to be able to disengage. If he learns technique, he's going to be a player because he's just got the physical tools. He's got those long arms he can use to disengage from offensive linemen, to kind of push them around. Question is, can he figure out how to put the pieces together? And this is going to give him an extra opportunity. It's going to give him more time to do it. So, I like to be optimistic on this show when I can. The Jets make it very difficult with the way they handle certain things, but it's not all bad news for the Jets. Now, I'd love to see them just work this thing out. And I don't know what it looks like. Like, obviously, you're the Jets. You can't give them a blank check. And there have been reports the Jets aren't willing to negotiate with Reddick. Look, this thing has to get settled. And the Jets need to find a way to thread the needle here. Because, again, you don't want to give a market resetting contract to Reddick right now. But you also need this guy here. And you don't want this guy disgruntled. So I think the Jets have and maybe it's not all their fault. The Jets have put themselves in a tough spot. There will be some benefits, such as the extra staffs from McDonald. It's not the end of the world at this moment. There's still time to figure it out. They just have to figure it out. And I hope that they will in the days and weeks ahead. But for today, that's it. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you don't miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on the podcast wars, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your Wednesday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.